to Legally Speaking. With me, Tarun Nangia. Today, we're going to discuss an important issue, which is the rating agency ecosystem and some suggestions for improving this ecosystem. For that, I have a very eminent panel who joins me today. May I welcome S. Ravi. He's founder of Ravi Rajan and Company. Good to see you, sir. I have with me Mohit Saraf, managing partner of Saraf and Partners. Good to see you, and congratulations on concluding a $12 billion deal between Vedanta and Foxconn. I think that was a recent wins for your law firm. Looking forward to some interesting inputs from you too. I have with me Rakesh Nangia, chairman of Nangia Anderson. Good to see you, sir. And looking forward to some interesting insights from you as usual. And since we all have seen that rating agencies since the late 2005-6 has been in news for various reasons. And obviously, the other side of the story also has to be known, that the challenges faced by the rating agencies, what can be done to improve this system, because it is for the interest of the commercial and the business world. In the first 2-3 minutes, may I request Mr. S. Ravi, founder of Ravi Rajan and Company, to lay the ground before we move ahead with the questions. Over to you, Mr. Ravi.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to the show. The rating agencies as such have been under a lot of scrutiny, and especially if you look at the ILFS and after that the parliamentary committee that was set up. So there was a lot of scrutiny on the rating agencies. The regulators have come hard on them, and there is a perception amongst the bankers and maybe everybody that the rating industry is not doing the right job. Some of which may not be absolutely true, because but there is an issue here, and how do they improve the perception? So if you look at all the rating agencies in India, most of them have knowledge partners who are overseas global rating agencies or equity holders here. So it is not that we are away from the global trends, but the perception is what is actually hitting the rating agency at this point of time. And 2019, the parliamentary committee met, and there were various suggestions, which I will dwell on it as we move forward. But that has sort of mitigated many of these risks that were there with the rating agency. That is what I think is going to improve the perception of the rating agency. Okay. This is my initial comment. And also, we must also understand, before I give it over to my other panelists, that the ecosystem is depending on the rating agency a lot. And we are not able to assess, and that should be an assessment of what is the confidence level or what is the right decisions they have taken. Sometimes only the bad decisions are highlighted decisions are brought to the fore, but they would have taken some very good calls, and that never comes to the forefront. That's all I have to say.
Very beautiful put by Mr. S. Ravi. It's like the work of the intelligence agencies. For every attack that they avert, they never get the credit. For every faux pas, they are always criticized. I'll go to Mr. Mohit Saraf from Saraf and Partners for his opening comment.
Actually, we all need to understand what is the role of a rating agency. I think that's an important part before we get into a little bit more discussion. I would say today, I think we all understand that India today's the GDP is $3.3 trillion, and we are moving to $10 trillion. If that is what is required, then in next 10, 12, 15 years, what we require is, like, typically a debt equity ratio is 70:30. So you would require almost a $10 trillion of debt in this country. Now, for raising debt, rating agency report is very critical. And that's an important part, because remember, there are two conflicts of interest. One is the people who want to subscribe to debt, and one is the issuer, the issue company. And they obviously have a conflict of interest. Now, this asymmetry of information is plugged in by a rating agency. So therefore, it is an independent agency, and we can talk about their independence as well, because there's a lot of discussion, because the target company, the issuer actually pays the rating agency bill and invoices and things like that. So there is a lot of discussion on the conflict of interest. But what is important is this gap gets filled by the rating agency. And this is a very important gap, because if they raise risk or they give low rating, then the cost of capital becomes very high. if they give high rating, the cost capital becomes low. But if they actually go wrong on their assessment of risk, then though the cost of capital is low, but the risk which the lenders have taken is enormous. And that is a big issue. So I would say really look at it is that is the reason obviously because remember today in market, it is not that usual market where every business model of the company can be understood. If you remember how the Amazon model was never understood for a long time in India. And I would say in that type of a market, rating agency has to be ahead of the curve. So they should be able to understand and plug the gaps where the debt servicing will be a problem. And some of these things are the challenge because they often do not have full information. By the time they get information, it's too late in the day. And they do not have capability to actually understand the risk issues of disruptions, of not able for an issuer not to pay not to honor the credit. So these are the challenges. And I would say it requires a lot of thinking. We should never underplay how much help the rating agencies do to corporate India to raise our debt. But you remember whether it's a government of India or whether it's a corporate, because say when somebody's rating, my daughter gets rated by the class teacher, she always gets upset. And that's the standard. So I would say we have to find a right balance and so that the both do the job well.
Thanks for that opening comment. I'll go to Rakesh Nangia, chairman of Nangia Anderson. Over to you, Mr. Nangia.
Just to supplement what Mohit and Mr. Ravi has said it, see what happens, see, rating agency plays such an important role for the purpose of, for the subscriber to the debt, for any person subscribing to that. What does he really look into that? See, he looks for the specialized agency who assigns a certain rating to that instrument and which becomes an enabler and to decide whether he needs to subscribe to that debt or that instrument or not. So rating agencies, they assign a rating to financial products, which could be in NCDs, which could be bonds, which could be bank loans, which could be CP, FD, or any type of instruments. And it is a very, very important indicator to the overall credit worthiness of an enterprise, which is arrived after analyzing various financial and operational strengths of the company. So what is market? So it helps the market also to effectively and efficiently evaluate credit risk of any instrument is concerned. So suppose even you subscribe to anything, what do you look for that? How do you know about the company? What is the enabler for you to take a decision? So one of the things is the important parameter is this, what is the rating which has been assigned to that? Every investor, whether it is a corporate, individual, they look for that. They look for the specialized agency, then he can evaluate and the risk, and then he can take a decision whether he needs to do that or not to subscribe to that instrument or not to do that. So in the entire ecosystem, if you see that for the entire subscribers, it plays one of the very, very effective, highly important role for the person to decide a rating and see what rating is being assigned, whether he needs to subscribe to the debt or not to do that. So people are totally dependent on it. I can tell you that.
Thank you for that opening comment. I'll go across to Mr. S. Ravi. I want to ask from you that there have been instances where companies with good rating also have fallen. Can we also attribute it to a genuine error of judgment on part of rating agencies? And if it is so, then any systemic improvements that you may want to suggest?
So there are multiplicity of factors by which a rating agency cannot read the real situation. It can be because of real-time data that they don't have. There could be a data gap because what happens, they come and rate, there is a review mechanism, but the data may not be available, especially from the banking system, because from CRILIC, they don't get data from CRILIC, that is the RBI data, they don't get it. So they have to depend on the banks to get to the default position. So this is a big challenge as far as the rating agencies are concerned. So sometimes there could be an event which is far faster than the rating agency can catch up. So this is one very, very common aspect. Second is sometimes they can go wrong on the industry. So what happens is the industry trends can be sometimes cannot be read. For example, what we saw it in the power sector or the coal sector in 2008 to 13, you saw what happened in that. Or nobody could even visualize what happened in the telecom sector at that point of time. So there are some unknown factors also. Plus, also there is one big challenge: redundancy. The same thing, they are looking at it again and again. And how to strengthen this is to have rotation of rating agencies. That's a very big must, because what happens, I'm looking at the same, like rotation of auditors. We get rotated. How does it help us? Because there is a fresh set of eyes and new knowledge that comes in. So I think it is very important that rotation happens in order to stop the same thought process. And these are the primary reasons. I look at it from a very broad perspective. There is no sort of malafide in this, but there can be an error of judgment. There can be error of understanding the industry, and there could be also the fact that we know everything. So this can be a very strong reason for the rating agencies to fail at times. But most important, we must benchmark them with how many successes they have instead of 1 or 2 failures, which can be easily highlighted. So we should look at it from an overall perspective.
That's a very important point you made, Mr. Ravi. In fact, rotation one, but second, that we only highlighted when they fall. By and large, when they do a good work, that we never, in a sense, speak about. I'll go to Mr. Mohit Saraf for his comment.
I would say both these issues, which we've talked about, is very important. Right now, if you look at it, in RBI is the banking sector regulator, and SEBI is an equity market regulator. Now, there are a lot of information which comes to RBI and SEBI. Now, a lot of this information, there's a lag time before it gets to the rating agency. That's one big issue. And I think that can be improved by what Ravi said, that the availability of information at an advance can help the process. The second thing is also equally important, which is globally, that typically the issuers are under obligation to inform the rating agency. And there's a very, very strong requirement for them to do that. And if they fail to do that, there is a lot of punitive action. So again, that is an important part we need to do, because really at the end of the day, if the garbage is in, the garbage is out. Good data is in, good data is out. And that's an important part. Rating agencies largely rely on what the issuer gives them the data. And so therefore, I think that's an important part, that the regulators can coordinate so that they get good information. They also need to improve their skilling so that they are able to understand new businesses and their model and their disruption, so that they are with time. Because remember, Tarun, if you are a good agency, if you're a good corporate, you should be able to get good rating and it reduce your cost of capital. Now, if the rating agencies become overly conservative and they start giving lower grades, then the cost of capital is increasing, and that affects the competitiveness of the country. So I think there's an important issue is to not to be overly, not to brush risk under the carpet, but also not to be very conservative. And I think a lot of challenges, because when the rating agency become conservative, because there is a public perception about a group or something else, so they start getting worried. And that's at the end of the day, Tarun, these are all human beings, and they obviously get influenced by how the regulators go after them. But I would say SEBI has a big role to play in this entire issue. I think they have improved it. We have to make a bigger role so that the rating criteria are in public domain. That when you take up, they basically inform what is the basis of rating criteria, what is the process we are doing. And sometimes when rating agencies raise a red flag, there should be standardization of red flag. Because otherwise, if the language of the press release are different people react differently, and it does more damage than it actually solves the problem. So I would say these type of information flow, stronger regulatory things, and also I would say sometimes also there's a mindset issue, because when somebody believes that you are paying a rating agency, you're paying the fees, so you feel that why are they asking so uncomfortable questions? And I think that also creates a lot of confusion. But I think we have to understand, like what Ravi said, that really rating agencies they're not like lawyers. Lawyers are only married to the client. They have a global relationship. They are like statutory auditor. They have obligation to public, to third party. And therefore, because of that, they need to be doing above board. And therefore, sometimes the information which they ask may not be appropriate, but if you don't give it, it does more damage. So I would say that's an important part, and the issuer and the rating agency should have a good chat. Rating agency should not think themselves like an investigator, and issuers should not get overly worried if they ask a wrong question. So I would say if they make it work together, they are able to show how the cash flows will be sufficient to honor the debt. I would say it will be a much better thing than to sometimes take them as an adversary.
Thanks for giving that insight. I'll go to Mr. Nangia for his comment, and also Mr. Nangia, if you could share with us the constraints under which rating agencies work according to you, if you have any points on that also.
I can just supplement what has been said by my colleagues again here. See, what happens is rating, whatever you rating assign is a very, very important barometer, which I said, which becomes instrumental to take a decision. So it is actually when they do the rating, is the quality of the data that becomes a very, very important role on what they're going to rely on that. But the data has no meaning if the people behind it do not really come out with the exactly analysis of the data is concerned. The training, the foresightness, basically. And at the same time, the responsibility which they're carrying on their head actually is, as I said, it is so important for the people to take a decision to invest or not to invest. So in my opinion, one of the things is this: quality is very, very important. Contemporaneous data is extremely important. Putting it in the right form and format, and at the same time, making it easy to understand. You know, if you see the rating at times, you have so many pluses, so many minuses. As a normal investor, even a good reasonable investor will really B plus, BB minus, triple B plus, triple B minus, B plus, B minus. So I know it is a global trend if you see the global agencies is there, but in my personal opinion, there has to be certain thing if your threshold should be made. So you need to divide it for people to take a more analytical decision. So it should be easy to understand, easy to fathom, and easy to take a decision. One important thing which I need to tell you, if like any other thing, there's a sea change coming up here. What a rotational part, and I need to add very important part is that, Tarun, that rotational of all the statutory pre-functions which happen, whether it's auditor or any other people, banks, NBFC, all have been taken. A banking regulation act actually decide the rotation of the auditors. They even decide the tenure of that. Actually, what is the tenure? They even decide that cooling period is concerned. The reason is this: you take IRDA for the insurance company, they made it mandatory there should be a joint auditor. So what is happening is building these practices, actually strengthening the whole ecosystem. This becomes a very, very important role. It's a human behavior, it's a human nature, and nobody can escape out of it. It's basically you tend to become complacent. If you tend to continue to do with one company again and again, your mindset becomes frozen actually. Here, if there's a similar pattern, not necessarily the same pattern, with a limitation, I think this becomes very important for the regulator to review whether rotational, which is coming everywhere basically, should also come at the rating agency. And last, I think, just to add to it, since the entire ecosystem is governed, then one of the committees which have given a report to the government, which is pending before the government, for the rotation of the auditor of the listed company, because 75% of the auditors of the listed company are the very few auditors. The committee has sent a report to the government to even look into the process of whether we can bring this process of rotation even in the listed company or not, though it has come in the other ecosystem. So this will act, in my opinion, will be one of the very important barometer, basically, to decide basically to strengthen the whole ecosystem. And I tell you, Tony, you do everything same day, same people. Your mindset is closed. Everything is closed. You don't think beyond. So same thing, I think one of this thing can be a very important role, bringing a rotational even in the rating agencies. This is one of the things.
Thank you for that analysis. I'll go across to Mr. Ravi. So if you could share with us, what is the outlook of the industry towards rating agencies? Currently, what is the mood? Because one is cost of capital, but secondly, given the overall business environment in India specifically, what is the outlook of Indian industry towards these agencies?
So first of all, let us get into some figures. Approximately 66,000 companies got rated in the last 2 years. And you will be surprised to know that 20-odd thousand have refused rating in the current last year. So the industry has not, though they want to have capital at a low cost, but those who do not have capital, do not want capital, or who are BB plus, do not want to go for rating. So this is a challenge, because what happens for the rating agency also, they are reviewing this every on a periodic basis, so the cost goes up for them without getting paid for that. So this is a very big challenge. So the industry has also to understand where the rating agencies have a role to play. Just for capital, they go to them, and when they have capital, they're happy. They don't want to. They are BB plus. They don't want to go further and get them rated. Some of the industries who are in this business, who are raising capital on a continuous basis, want to have cheaper capital, are continuously working with the rating agencies. But one very negative aspect here is shopping. Actually, suppose somebody as an industry, you come to the rating agency, I'm not satisfied with that, I don't take the rating and go to somebody else. And this is something I think even the parliamentary committee has debated about it, and this should be stopped. Because what happens, there is a perception, or there is a feeling that the other rating agency will give a better rating, which is not exactly true, because it's all calibrated in a big way. So I think the industry also got to accept it. The industry has benefited from the rating system. And I think there are good companies, and there is where the gap is widening. The good companies actually use rating as a leverage, whereas the not so good companies, or those who are not doing well, they shy away from rating. This is a very common phenomena that I have noticed across the industry.
And you are suggesting that they also have a responsibility to get rated, not only when they want to access capital.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a very important aspect, because what happens, one has to work together, and industry must take this, because it's all emanating from Basel. See, these are not guidelines which are home made. These are all coming from Basel requirements and capital adequacy requirements. So there is a process, and there is a regulation that is coming, and the regulators are looking at it. So I think it's an important thing to understand, and people should be prepared for rating. But Mohit made a point, and I think even Rakesh made a point about the transparency of rating. The rating agency must also come. These are the parameters I'm going to evaluate, so that the industry is also prepared to move along with them. It's a two-way process. And I think the bridging the gap is very important.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. I'll go across to Mohit Saraf for his comment.
I would say the rotation is a very important thing. European Union have already made rules for that. And so therefore, this is a standard thing. We should do that. The other equally important is that you need to improve availability of more rating agency. There has to be a healthy competition. Because if you have only 2-3 rating agencies, like a chartered accountant, you have multiple chartered accountants. So you have options to go to different people. So I would say that's again an important thing. The market depth needs to be increased so that people can get multiple rating agencies. And also, I think on the regulation bit, I think Ravi mentioned very important point is that rating shopping, that you go to different people and whoever give you the best deal you get. And I would say that's again an important issue. So there is a SEBI regulation which covers that if the issuer refuses to accept your rating, then there is an obligation to disclose. Yeah. And these are some of these things very important, because if somebody doesn't like your rating, then your obligation to disclose should be there. For somebody who's not cooperating with you, because I think Ravi mentioned about data, availability of data, Rakesh also mentioned. So therefore, if he's not giving you right data at the right time, then you can also make disclosure. Because really at the end of the day, what is really required is that there should be everybody, rating agency should be on the job 24/7, because markets are very, very volatile and things can happen. You've seen how crypto exchange collapsed overnight. So this any day can happen. And I would say they need to understand the new business model. They need to understand credit risk in the new business model. And if there is a lack of information, I think that information needs to flow from RBI and SEBI simultaneously. There should be a very strong obligation on the issuer to keep updating it. If they do not cooperate, there should be an obligation to disclose, so that the lender, the market, the creditors, they can understand that there's a problem there. I would say, and there should be, I think what is equally important is from a corporate India, that matured people should be looking at companies. Remember, India is a third world country. It's a developing country. And the companies are coming up with new processes. So when you start looking at credit risk of the company from how a top NASDAQ company runs or a Dow Jones runs, then you obviously get into a problem. So there is a lot of nascent companies, good cash flows, good companies, but they don't have the processes. And that is an important part that the rating agency in India need to understand it, because not rating them appropriately or lower or putting a lower grade increases the cost of capital. You remember how Mr. Jaitley used to get upset when our rating agencies do not move us up. So I would say it's a similar issue. The cost of capital for the country goes up. So I would say it's a very interesting balance, but you can't overstep, but you can't be callous. And I think that is an important part which we need to understand. And therefore, obviously, the job is very, very important, but very challenging in this non-transparent world.
Thanks for that comment. I'll go across to Mr. Rakesh Nangia from Nangia Anderson. Mr. Nangia, in promoter-driven companies also, do you think there is an expectation which has to be in a met or underlying pressure on the rating agencies, and also your comment on this issue?
So what happens is a very natural analogy with promoter-driven. There could be a possibility of any influence taking place. But here what Mohit said, again, it comes again the rating agencies, the quality, the dependency, the people behind it, like I mentioned, the people who are doing it. There is always a possibility of compromise, but this does not need to be generalized that also. Any person need to uphold the dignity of what you're working for that. And especially in the case of a rating agency, you must realize it evaluates a credit risk. It helps you in taking a decision. Your capital is getting involved, whether it is a corporate, whether it's an individual or any person. So it's a high risk, basically. How do you rate a company? How do you think about a company? What do you decide about a company? It's one rating which is assigned by a specialized agency. That is the only barometer. You decide whether I need to do that, I don't need to do that. So in fact, you don't go beyond the financial balance sheet, what is hidden behind the figure, what are the qualifications, you don't know about it. So what you do, you see the rating, and it's given the bold, company has been rated like that. So I'm trying to tell you, it's an extremely important decision-making tool, a barometer, which helps you in taking a decision. And your investment, your money is at stake. Whether it's the money of the institution or whether it's money of the individual, whether it's money of any lender is concerned, is the money at stake, basically. So whether not limited to, I should say, the promoter-driven company, there may be certain issues, but we should not generalize that. There are good credit agencies doing a good job, and at the same time, with something in the market, you see something happen, ripples taking place in the market, you tend to immediately become very strong. You become very strong about it, which may not be there in the past. So I can only tell you the whole ecosystem of the debt, whether it is a government, whether it is, which Mohit mentioned it, whether it's a corporate, whether it's a promoter-driven company, anyway, the whole ecosystem is one of the important barometer tool to take a decision to invest or not. And every person is dependent on that. And hence it cannot be ignored. And it has the entire ecosystem by the government needs to be tightened if there is being misused or if there's a loose ends in the process, actually. So it's a very, very important barometer. I can say that.
Thank you. Appreciate all of you joining us and also sharing some suggestions, which I think will be taken forward in due course. Some very welcome suggestions, some good analysis that you gave, giving the perspective of the dilemma of the rating companies. That can't be ignored. They also face challenges at their end, which all the three panelists highlighted. Thank you, Mr. S. Ravi, Mr. Mohit Saraf, Managing Partner of Saraf and Partners, Mr. Rakesh Nangia from Nangia Anderson. You made time, you joined for this show. And viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.